Continuing where I left off. It was no wonder the men were in a good humor now. For my part, I was horribly cast down. Should the scheme he had now sketched prove feasible, Silver, already doubly a traitor, would not hesitate to adopt it. He had still a foot in either camp, and there was no doubt he would prefer wealth and freedom with the pirates to a bare escape from hanging, which was the best he had to hope on our side. Nay, and even if things so fell out that he was forced to keep his faith with Dr. Livesey, even then what danger lay before us? What a moment that would be when the suspicions of his followers turned to certainty, and he and I should have to fight for dear life. He a cripple, and I a boy, against 5 strong and active seamen? Add to this double apprehension the mystery that still hung over the behavior of my friends. Their unexplained desertion of the stockade, their inexplicable cession of the chart, or harder still to understand, the doctor's last warning to Silver, "Look out for squalls when you find it," and you will readily believe how little taste I found in my breakfast, and with how uneasy a heart I set forth behind my captors on the quest for treasure. We made a curious figure. Had anyone been there to see us, all in soiled sailor clothes, and all but me armed to the teeth? Silver had 2 guns slung about him, one before and one behind, besides the great cutlass at his waist, and a pistol in each pocket of his square-tailed coat. To complete his strange appearance, Captain Flint sat perched upon his shoulder, and gabbling odds and ends of purposeless sea talk. I had a line about my waist, and followed obediently after the sea cook, who held the loose end of the rope, now in his free hand, now between his powerful teeth. For all the world I was led like a dancing bear. The other men were variously burthened, some carrying picks and shovels, for that had been the very first necessary they brought to shore from the Hispaniola. Other ladins with pork, bread, and brandy for the midday meal. All the stores, I observed, came from our stock, and I could see the truth of Silver's words that night before. Had he not struck a bargain with the doctor, he and his mutineers, deserted by the ship, must have been driven to subsist on a clear water and the proceeds of their hunting. Water would have been little to their taste. A sailor is not usually a good shot, and besides all that, when they were so short of eatables, it was not likely they would be very flushed of powder. Well, thus equipped, we all set out. Even the fellow with the broken head, who should certainly have kept in the shadow, and straggled, one after another, to the beach, where the 2 gigs awaited us. Even these bore traces of the drunken folly of the pirates, one in a broken thwart, and both in their muddy and unbailed condition. Both were to be carried along with us for the sake of safety. And so, with our numbers divided between them, we set forth upon the bosom of the anchorage. As we pulled over, there was some discussion on the chart. The Red Cross was, of course, far too large to be a guide, and the terms of the note on the back, as you will hear, admitted of some ambiguity. They ran, the reader may remember, thus: Tall tree, spy glass shoulder, bearing a point to the north of north-northeast, Skeleton Island east-southeast, and by east, 10 feet. A tall tree was thus the principal mark. Now, right before us, the anchorage was bounded by a plateau from 200 to 300 feet high, adjoining on the north the sloping southern shoulder of the Spyglass, and rising again towards the south into the rough cliffy eminence called the Mizzenmast Hill. The top of the plateau was dotted thickly with pine trees of varying height, every here and there one of a different species rose 40 or 50 feet clear above its neighbors, and which of these was the particular tall tree of Captain Flint could only be decided on the spot, and by the readings of the compass. Yet, although that was the case, every man on board the boats had picked a favorite of his own ear. Where we were halfway over, Long John alone shrugging his shoulders and bidding them wait till they were there. We pulled easily, by Silver's directions, not to weary the hands prematurely, and after quite a long passage, landed at the mouth of the second river, that which runs down a woody cleft of the Spyglass. Thence, bending to our left, we began to ascend the slope towards the plateau. At the first outset, heavy, miry ground and a matted marish vegetation greatly delayed our progress, but by little and little the hill began to steepen and become stony underfoot, and the wood to change its character and to grow in a more open order. It was, indeed, a most pleasant portion of the island that we were now approaching, a heavy scented broom and many flowering shrubs that had almost taken the place of grass. Thickets of green nutmeg trees were dotted here and there with the red columns and the broad shadow of the pines, and the first mingled their spice with the aroma of the others. The air, besides, was fresh and stirring, and this, under the sheer sunbeams, was a wonderful refreshment to our senses. The party spread itself abroad in a fan shape, shouting and leaping to and fro. About the sentry, and a good way behind the rest, Silver and I followed. I teetered by my rope, he plowing with deep pants among the sliding gravel. From time to time, indeed, I had to lend him a hand, for he must have missed his footing and fallen backward down the hill. We had thus proceeded for about half a mile, and were approaching the brow of the plateau, when the man upon the farthest left began to cry aloud as if in terror. Shout after shout came from him, and the others began to run in his direction. "He can't a found the treasure," said old Morgan, hurrying past us from the right, "for that's clean atop." Indeed, as we found when we also reached the spot, it was something very different. At the foot of a pretty big pine, and involved in a green creeper, which had even partly lifted some of the smaller bones, a human skeleton lay, with a few shreds of clothing, on the ground. I believe a chill struck for a moment to every heart. "He was a seaman," said George Merry, who, bolder than the rest, had gone up close and was examining the rags of the clothing. "Leastways, this is good sea cloth." "Aye, aye," said Silver, "like enough. You wouldn't look to find a bishop here, I reckon. But what sort of a way is that for bones to lie? Tain't nature?" Indeed, on a second glance, it seemed impossible to fancy that the body was in a natural position, but for some disarray, the works, perhaps, of the birds that had fed upon him, or of the slow-growing creeper that had gradually enveloped his remains. The man lay perfectly straight, his feet pointing in one direction, his hands raised above his head like a diver's, pointing directly in the opposite. "I've taken a notion into my old numbskull," observed Silver. "Here's the compass. There's the tip-top point o' Skeleton Island sticking out like a tooth, just like a bearing. Will you, along the lines of them bones?" It was done. The body pointed straight in the direction of the island, and the compass read dully S-E-S-E and by E. "I thought so," cried the cook. "This here is a pinter. Right up there is our line for the Pole Star and the Jolly Dollars. But by thunder, if it don't make me cold inside to think of Flint, this is one of his jokes and no mistake. Him and these 6 were alone here. He killed 'em, every man, and this one he hauled here and laid down by compass, shiver my timbers. They're long bones, and their hair's been yellow." "Ah, that would be Allardyce. You mind Allardyce, Tom Morgan?" "Aye, aye," returned Morgan. "I mind him. He owed me money, he did, and took my knife ashore with him." "Speaking of knives," said another, "why don't we find his lying around? Flint won't weren't the man to pick a seaman's pocket, and the birds, I guess, would leave it be. By the powers, and that's true, cried Silver. There ain't a thing left here, said Mary, still feeling round among the bones. Not a copper doit, not a basie box, it don't look natural to me. No, by gum it don't, agreed Silver. Not natural nor not nice, says you. Great guns, messmates, but if Flint was living, this would be a hot spot for you and me. 6 they were, and 6 are we, and bones is what they are now. I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you for watching. If you're watching, please give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, comment or view, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.